We did find out, interestingly enough, this week that we are now AI native.
It's no longer the big eating the small, it's the quick eating the slow. Yeah, I think the problem that I'm facing using AI for sales and driving sales is similar to a lot of enterprises, right? And how do they use AI? What's their use case they're going after?
Hi, everyone. It's Daniel Kube here from servicePath. I'm the CEO, and this is another episode of Executive Conversations. What we try to focus on are talking to leaders in the IT industry about, changes that are going on in sales and enablement, marketing, AI, and just try to figure out, based on our histories, what can we leverage from them, but what can we learn new about what's going on. So I love having people come and share who have deep experience, but are also, I would argue, on some of the cutting edge of some of the things that are going on in the market and developments. And so today, I'm very lucky to have my friend Rob Stevens, who is now Vice President or new CRO at IT Methods. You have a big title there. I don't know, lots of acronyms. And Rob has an extensive history of sales, not only channel, omni-channel, multi-partner, but also like carrying a bag way back when, but has worked with some of the leading organizations in the world in IT. So Amazon, Microsoft, you name it, and a whole bunch of different niche vendors who have really interesting go-to-markets, including IT Methods, which is doing some amazing stuff today. And so today, I'm hoping, Rob, you're going to share a bit about how you grew up in sales, what you learned along the way, and there seems to be an interesting pattern with the companies that you work for where, there were leaders 20 years ago, they sort of hit a quiet period, and then all of a sudden they phoenixed again and become new leaders and seem to be constantly reinventing themselves and getting value for their shareholders as a result. And also, one of the things I love to talk about are, mentors. I would argue mentors are probably one of the single biggest things that have helped me influence, my success, and also, giving me that sort of pay it forward mentality. But anyways, I've had enough talking for me. Rob, welcome, and thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me. Great. It's great to be here.
So how about you start at the beginning? It sounds like you're probably from Saskatchewan or something like that.
That's right. Yeah, Saskatchewan. You just have to go on a boat east, and then it's Saskatchewan over there. It's that one. Yeah, starting from the beginning. It's funny, you just give me a bit of a flashback. So you said, where did I start? And I think I just had a flashback to when I started actually I worked for a telco in the UK, then I went into desktop support, and then I went into consulting with Fujitsu in the UK, and then through consulting I went to pre-sales, technical, and sales at Microsoft, which is really kind of where I jumped into the vendor side of things. But I did 6 years actually consulting, and it was great. It was a great experience kind of working with customers and finding that stuff out. Then I started working with Microsoft, and they said, hey, do you want to interview? Come and join us. And at that time, it was an amazing experience to go there. And that actually definitely sent me on a kind of mission of where I wanted to be and kind of what I wanted to do. I was incubating products across the Nordic region for many years, building go-to-markets, breaking new ceilings, finding out how to do stuff. And you just mentioned mentors. I had a flashback as well to a mentor that I had in the UK who subsequently came to Canada and went to Seattle. And as a guy I hold, he's now retired, lucky guy, but he's a guy I hold dear to my heart in terms of kind of the coaching that I got. So yeah, I'm happy to touch on all of those things, but I have had the privilege, and I kind of deem it a privilege, of being able to work for Microsoft, being able to work for AWS, being able to do a short stint at SAP, and in all of those environments definitely learn good things, bad things, how to do things, how not to do things. So kind of imagining yourself and learning definitely has been a big part of my career.
So I imagine you don't have to say how old you are, but I'm guessing you started off in the on-prem world where you used to sell CDs and discs and hardware, and you had maintenance contracts, and now you've transformed totally to a consumption model guy.
Yeah.
And there were some years where that was probably really tough, and a lot of organizations are still struggling with that today, right? Where consumption models and one-time pricing elements but yeah, maybe talk about that voyage and where did you see it begin to change?
Yeah, definitely CDs, definitely floppy disks. I am aging myself now. I'm a proud 50-year-older. I turned 50. I'm proud to say that. Yeah, definitely seen a lot of that sort of transition. I think I was fortunate enough when I was incubating businesses at Microsoft, and we started this in Canada. We were incubating what we called then online services, and it was Microsoft's first foray into hosting things like live meeting, or now we know it as Teams, right? And it's gone through many iterations of that, but web conferencing. An anti-spam service that they had at the time was called Exchange Hosted Services. It was a terrible name. We didn't really explain what it was doing, but it was an anti-spam service. And all of these things were leading up to a product at the time called BPOS, Business Productivity Online Services, which was the predecessor to Office 365. And actually kind of witnessing that transition, both from a technical, from a how customers buy, from a how we sell, from a how we compensate people internally, and how that my team would got compensated for selling these things versus consumption versus, just a license sale, was extremely different. And, I saw this big switch at Microsoft where we kind of hit this point where they wanted to drive a lot more subscription and licensing, whereas in the past that had been a dirty word. We wanted these big 3-year enterprise agreements, software deals where we get this big check and we could rely on that coming in. And now it was, how can we make services more sticky? How can we charge for overusage of services? How can we kind of get a committed contract but then burn down on those committed contracts? So yeah, both from a licensing perspective, but also from what that meant to customers. And I remember early on actually reflecting to some senior leaders in the Canadian subsidiary that didn't understand this model too well. And I showed them my inbox and I was like, guys, this is how many outages we've had, or these are how many service affecting incidents we've had. And they were like, what are you talking about? Like, yeah, these are the services that now that we're developing, that you've got to realize when your email service goes down, they're going to call you. They're going to call the Microsoft account manager now, or the technical account manager, say, hey, my email service is down, because that's the business we're getting into. And that was night and day switch from people that were just selling software, and you go and deploy it on-prem or however you want and build it with whatever partner, whatever hardware you wanted to use. Now you're actually owning the crown jewel service of many companies, right? Which was email for many people. So the kind of engagement with customers, the way we sold those things, so many differences, so many interesting experiences that I could talk to you an hour just about those things.
So just at Microsoft specifically, what was the one big thing that you learned and you still persist and train your sales teams on today that has had a big impact? And maybe what's the one thing that you have ceased and desisted and run away from and will never do again?
Oh my God, that's a great question. I think it comes back to making sure the customer understands what they're getting. I think for a long time we sold software and expected people just to do whatever they wanted to do with it, right? And the goal as an individual seller carrying a quota was, hey, I got to sell this license for X product, and away we go. And that's what we've got to do. But very quickly, Microsoft is very smart. It puts together scorecards and measurements of kind of how things are performing, and it learns very well. And it starts to put together scorecards of, hold on a second, we've got shelfware for previous versions of, pick your product. Now the customer's not going to buy the next version, or it's not going to buy the next version. And how do I kind of keep that current? And there's all of this R&D and development work gone into, currency and future versions and additional capabilities. But people weren't ready to consume those things, right? They weren't ready to experience those. So for me, it's really about making sure customers are understanding the value in what they're buying, why they're buying it, making sure the conversation is much deeper than it has ever been, rather than just, hey, we want to sell you the next license, or we want to sell you the next version. It's looking at the T-minus 36 process, right? When you've got a 3-year agreement, okay, the clock starts ticking. But are we showing value all the way over those 3 years to make sure that customers want to, move with our product versus going to the next product? And I think that is a much more sticky approach that we need to take when we've deployed something, where we're engaged. It's not set it, forget it, kind of move on to the next thing. It's you've got to stay invested. You've got to stay with the customer on that journey, and you've got to continue to show them value. And I think the cloud as a big moving piece over the last few years has been a real kind of eye opener for a lot of people to be able to go and do that, rather than just selling them a software and then coming back for a renewal years later.
So, I know you own support and everything at IT Methods. So how do you deploy that philosophy today? And has it changed with AI at all, or is it better?
I think we're still at the early stages of that. As much as we'd like to think we're moving fast, I think the whole customer experience of engaging with us, getting back to them in a speedy time, being able to predict kind of what's going on and being able to kind of give customers more insights, I think that we're much further down that path. Something we didn't do until, previously when I was here was customer alerting. We manage a lot of environments for a lot of customers, for a lot of business critical apps that they consider are business critical. And if they go down, their productivity is out the window, certain groups get affected. So
Yeah,
now,
actually, Rob, it might be interesting just on that
yeah,
note for you to share what IT Methods does, because you like it's a crazy business. Like you
yeah,
manage like literally tens of thousands of developers globally for some of the largest brands in the world.
absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah,
no, thanks for opening that. It's funny we didn't start with that. I
yeah,
should have taken that opportunity, but it's
yeah.
true. We're a 20-year-old company. For the last 10 years, we focused very heavily on public cloud infrastructure and looked at the hyperscalers as a way to develop DevOps tooling. So, 10 years ago, we were providing cloud-based iterations of a DevOps software, whether it's a product, whether it's a scanning product, whether it's a repository, whatever it may be, whatever is engaged in that software development lifecycle, the tools that go into that, we were providing those as cloud versions. And then as those vendors have created their own cloud versions, there's been additional value. As you said, a lot of our customers are regulated industry, financial services customers, where they have different compliance needs or regulatory controls, and they need an air gap system or a single instance system where they don't want multi-tenant kind of software providers just in the cloud. So yeah, we operate at scale. We're an AWS audited MSP. We're a SOC 2 certified MSP. So we operate, 24/7, kind of high 99.999 availability for these services, and making sure that customers have their development platform available. And some of them, they're doing releases of code, constant development, all the time. So it is critical for them. So providing as many insights as we can, providing as much kind of knowledge to kind of where they're going to hit bottlenecks, being predictive. Predictive measurement was something we heard probably 5-10 years ago was a big thing. How can we get predictive analysis? And that's one of the things, kind of almost a precursor to AI, to be honest with you. But yeah, that's definitely an area.
Yeah, and for those who might be confused what the word air gap is, because not everyone understands it, because it's a bit of an old term, but it's a new term that's beginning to flourish again. It basically means separation of your content from any external system via like a bridge. So basically an on-prem server or a dedicated server in the cloud that's super locked down, that can't go anywhere. And there's been a huge resurgence of this because people are very worried about their training data and how their data is being used in AI as employees begin to experiment and use all the superpowers it has for doing things like code. One of the big challenges is organizations, teams now are taking some of the crown jewels and putting those into LLMs and models that potentially are really dangerous. So for example, early on, there's the whole Samsung debacle where all their engineering diagrams were shared globally with the web. So a lot of corporate governance teams are now saying, hey, we need a very protected instance. The other thing that Rob has amazing exposure to, and he doesn't really talk a lot about, is the companies that he represents are some of the largest unicorns in the world who have some of the brightest minds doing some of the coolest things in AI globally, not only in the way they're leveraging technology, but how they're going to market. So he has some really unique perspectives, but you also have some great legacy knowledge. So after Microsoft, where did you go? And what did you learn? And what did you hate? And what did you not use?
Yeah, 13 years at Microsoft. I left to join SAP, and I had an amazing time at Microsoft. It really was like doing an MBA in business for me. Such great experiences, but I didn't know what I wanted to do next or where I could go. So I joined SAP, and that was my first foray into ERP systems. And it was very interesting actually speaking to customers there who had a much different kind of perspective of Microsoft, right? So dealing with now an ERP system and positioning that with customers and partners, and then hearing how they kind of thought about different vendors in the ecosystem was actually kind of eye-opening for me as well. But at that point, HANA was coming out. They really wanted to move much closer to the cloud and get more into the cloud. And there was all of these different kind of definitions and understanding of what the cloud really was. And it wasn't a cohesive one at that time. It was very mixed in terms of different parts of the product. Different companies they bought were all at different stages of making their product cloud native versus kind of bolting it on to a non-native database or a different kind of ERP service. So it was a real mix of solutions there. So for me, it was actually a great experience. It was I did learn a lot, as I say, about the ERP space, about kind of business processes, some of the challenges with selling in those things, some of the challenges customers face with actually getting things deployed and on time and on budget, as any large enterprise will know when they engage in that kind of stuff. So for me, it was interesting. But as I say, mostly the different stages of the different products they had in the evolution that they were at in terms of becoming cloud native. And and then after that, there was this small $14 billion startup that was coming to Toronto, and they were starting up their office there, Amazon Web Services, and I knew I had to be part of that journey. That's really kind of where I left after SAP.
So I know you're a car guy, and you've had like three big companies, and you have a TR6. We both have a TR6.
You do.
And for those who don't know, they're convertible 70s cars, and they have some interesting characteristics. So if you had three cars, a Mercedes, a BMW, and a TR6, which one would Amazon be, which one would SAP be, and which one would Microsoft be?
Oh my goodness. That's a great question. Oh my goodness. You know what? I think, can I get sued for anything I say on here? Or I think the TR6 would probably be, I don't know. The TR6 would probably be SAP. I went straight to I think the Mercedes would probably be Microsoft, because I'm always in awe about how Microsoft can learn and how they evolve into what they've got. And I think, Mercedes have done a good job like that. And I did have a Mercedes. And I would say maybe BMW for AWS, but I don't think I'm doing AWS justice by saying that.
What brand would you give AWS then? You can go, no limitations on car brand.
All right, I would probably say a Tesla, right? I would say something, or even a Rivian, right? And even a BYD, for those who don't know, the Chinese electric car BYDs, because I think the way that they architect these vehicles, the level of kind of future-proofing and stuff that's going in there, I think is pretty amazing. I'm always in awe. But between Microsoft and AWS, very different strategies. Microsoft come out early. They talk about kind of where they want to be. Amazon much more reserved in terms of what they want to announce and how they announce things. But then they come out with these amazing products. And, depending on which analyst you follow or kind of which thread you follow, they talk about the kind of leapfrogging, right? And the areas that you do. Amazon have always maintained that much more builder approach. So we can build anything, whereas Microsoft want to give you more of a polished product. So very different kind of approaches in those two companies. And
So, as sales or leaders in companies, one of our challenges is always solving, right? Because when you own, our companies, everyone's company is kind of like a TR6. It breaks down occasionally and you have to fix it. And one of the challenges that you have is, you don't have the smartest people in your company always, or the most knowledgeable about specific things. And one of the things with the companies where you've been at, and I know you've leveraged extensively, is the network and the community. And, it seems like all the companies that you have extensive, successful employment networks. How do you leverage it? Like, not only for knowledge, but like building new opportunities, go to markets and sharing. I know it's helped you extensively at IT Methods. Maybe share on some of your tricks there. That would be awesome.
Yeah, I think, there are some incredibly smart people that work at, but all of the companies that I've worked at, I've really had the privilege to work with some smart people. For me, it's about the trust that you build with them, and the confidence that you build in. I've had some very difficult conversations with people, and we've remained, friends over long periods of time. And, we've got that. I've worked with partners that have had very successful businesses when I first came to Canada 20 years ago to incubate some of those things, and we're still friends to this day, and they still credit me in part to their success and their ability to be able to exit their business. And I'm like, no, they're like, no, you definitely helped us get going. You definitely kind of built this stuff up. So I think being able to kind of rely on those core values of earning trust, kind of being honest and being, saying what you're going to do, doing what you say you're going to do. And even this morning, I was talking to somebody about trust, and I think once that's gone, you struggle to get that back. And I'm very fortunate to have either teams that I've worked with, people that have worked for me, people that I've worked for. I know that you can pick up the phone and just get some advice. You mentioned mentors. Hey, I've got this problem. What do I do? And you don't need to feel stupid by asking that question. They know that, oh yeah, I've actually had that problem, or I haven't had that problem. Let's figure it out together. So I think being able to lean on those people that you can trust, go to them. There's people at Microsoft that I recently have still texted and said, hey, what do you think about this? Or hey, what about that? And you don't have to have maintained an ongoing relationship week in, week out, but they're lifelong kind of connections that you make, right? And I think some of those things are amazing. Similarly, I've seen people retire and now do their own thing or go off and build businesses, and then they reach out and say, hey, can I get some help from you about what you're thinking? And it's like, yeah, it's just helping good people through the industry. So I think that's definitely it. But different companies have the different cultures, right? So there's also different personality types that you see as well across both of those.
Yeah. And so who do you follow from an analyst or podcast? Like, where do you get your new cutting edge stuff from? Or your partners? I mean, you're dealing with a whole bunch of cutting edge organizations in your company right now.
Yeah.
How do you continually learn? Like, I know you're a lifelong learner like I am. So yeah. How do you keep that up?
Is it wrong to say TikTok? Is that a bad thing?
Depends what you're watching, I guess.
Yeah. I've got that attention span, so that works for me.
Yeah.
There are people I follow on X. There are people I follow on LinkedIn. There are actually people I've unfollowed on LinkedIn, honestly, where I don't, I think they're more out for themselves than actually kind of sharing anything. And I think maybe that's just as I got older. Now I've decided who I want to follow and who I kind of believe in. You're absolutely right. I do have the fortune to work with some very kind of progressive companies. This week I was actually on a call with the global leadership team of one of the big software vendors that we work, and they had their leaders from across the country on the phone on the call, and we did a Q&A and we did a fireside chat. And some of the questions that they were coming up with gives me insight into kind of what they're facing and some of the challenges that they're bringing up, that they're trying to build. And their business is at a different stage, maybe early startup, maybe bringing a product to market, maybe struggling with integrating an acquisition, right? I think all of those different types of scenarios, from the companies I've been working with, the people that I follow on LinkedIn and X. My CEO is very forward thinking. He's very plugged into lots of the news and actually feeds us a lot of data, which I appreciate, because he'll be talking about something. Hey, did you see this article? Did you see that article? And I'm like, no, I didn't. And then you go and see those things. I don't know that there's a single source that I say, yes, follow this person, follow that thing. You're going to get a great perspective. I think with everything that's going on globally, politically, otherwise, you take bits and pieces and kind of wed that all together. So I think I don't know if anyone has cracked a way to synthesize that or what's the word I'm looking for, sanitize that and kind of present it in a more consumable way. Let me know, but it's just everything that comes at you.
Yeah, well, as you know, I landed this morning at 8:30 in the morning from Vegas because I was at the Gartner CSO or Chief Sales Officer conference. And I've worked with Gartner for 20 years and been in multiple Magic Quadrants. And when there are huge areas or high rates of change, that's when I believe the analysts can add a ton of value to companies and like their subscriptions, all those sort of things. Because I mean, when you're thinking, I understand this market, and when there's some calm, like people say, I don't need that, I already know that. But it was really interesting. The content that they shared over the past 3 days was amazing, because it was really helping organizations struggle. And most of it was, how do you actually embrace like agentic sales tools, go to markets with LLMs, and there were maturity models to it. But one of the things that interesting, and everyone seems to be struggling, right? Because we now have tool sprawl again, because there were so many enablement platforms and they all sort of sounded alike and they had some unique value props. But the cool thing is there's a huge opportunity for them. But by the same token, a lot of people were like deer in the headlights in the audience, just going like, how am I going to get started? Because they're in traditional industries and things like that.
Yeah.
And that's where these rubrics, and all the reports and all the studies from Gartner, I think really, really pay off. But they had one speaker, I can't remember the guy's name, and I'll put it in the notes after, and he was saying, just FYI, these big changes, everyone is absolutely confused, but we've been through this before. He says, think about Y2K, when you had to change your whole infrastructure and teach everyone, all your customers and globally about the threats. And, everyone had to be prepared with it. Think about when the North American auto industry was attacked by the Japanese auto market and everyone switched to Six Sigma and Kaizen, where you actually had to transform your organization in the way they worked, like literally in months. And and I'll put his name because it was a really interesting insight. And he says, there are models to how to get your team seated and make high rates of change fast that have existed for a long time that should be reused now. Don't reinvent the wheel.
Right.
But, absolutely leverage the technology, which was really, really great. But yeah, so I really enjoyed that. And there's also at Dell Tech in Vegas. And I mean, tech is alive and well. Anything tied to cloud or storage or compute, like it was absolutely booming. And yeah, lots of interesting things going on there for sure.
It's funny, one of the adages I love, and you've actually heard me say this when I think we've seen each other before, is it's no longer the big eating the small, it's the quick eating the slow, right? And I think I really believe in that, and I really believe that people have the agility to be able to switch their models, change stuff. Look at your business, right? CPQ product that, you've got to have the smallest time to value. People are going to change their pricing structures. They're going to invest in new things that they want to be able to sell. They've got to have a product that can stay with them and can be agile enough to actually kind of adapt to all of those things, right? Is it now a subscription model? Is it now a new model? Is it now different? Is it pay monthly model? Whatever it may be, the different products that they ship and how they build them. So I think I'm always interested wherever there's agility and wherever you can kind of respond to those things quickly, like I've seen you guys do. I think that can really help kind of remove the complexity in those models to actually help people say, you know what, don't go do that. We're going to do that for you. Let us just give you the easy button so that we can actually, give you a true solution. I think honestly that's what a lot of people are looking at, and Gartner do a great job of giving people that confidence of how to navigate through some of those things. So yeah, I need to look up some of the resources from that.
Yeah, one of the things they actually shared, and I'll see if I can get the links to the study or share some of the rubric, is they're talking about hiring salespeople today. And you hire someone who has a lot of experience or you hire someone young. And you take the risk. Because the way they put it, like the kids out who are graduating this year went through COVID, but they also have been embracing AI for 3 years natively. Yeah. Like this is the first generation of university grads and sales grads who are native AI users.
Yeah.
Right. So, we're sort of kludging it on, but I mean, and so the question is, do you bring these guys in? And I think the consensus was yes. But one of the things that they said or warned about was that the benefit of history and knowledge is super important when you build prompts and build context to what you're trying to achieve. But they're saying you can build that into a model so a new person who's really aggressive about learning and understanding can get up to speed really, really quickly. And I mean, Rob, it'd be interesting to get some of your comments because I know you're doing some experimenting right now with some agents for outreach. We won't say the name of the agent, but I thought it was a really amazing tool. But, as part of the discussion, when we had the brief with them, they said, oh, we have the engagement for about a minute, and then we try to pass it off to a live person. And I said, well, why do you do that? Well, they said, well, after a minute, our engine can start hallucinating a lot more. And I'm going, what? Yeah, because they said, because it sounds so natural, they've solved for speed versus quality on the model that they've built. So it was like a really interesting finding. But by the same token, it's just like, it is absolutely amazing. I think they said that the agent, so just for people who know, when you hire a BDR, it's probably like $6,000 to $8,000 a month or whatever to get them going. These agents are like $1,500 to $1,800 a month. They can do 130 calls in 5 minutes with a deep database that acts like a 10-year rep. So, but by the same token, if that 10-year rep starts hallucinating after a minute, that could do a bit of damage to your brand, potentially your product. So really interesting opportunity, but needs to be gated and corralled. And I think your use case, the way you're using it, is amazing because you're actually not trying to sell anything. You're just following up on webinars and assets. So how's that going?
Yeah, I think the problem that I'm facing using AI for sales and driving sales is similar to a lot of enterprises, right? And how do they use AI? What's their use case they're going after? And I think a lot of people know this is great technology, but are struggling to kind of use it. And even when I thought about where we needed to make gains as a company, where we needed to kind of get outreach, what were the blockers? Was it content? Was it webinars? Was it in-person activities? Was it BDR type functions? Was it inbound traffic? When you look at all the different kind of levers that you're pulling as a sales leader, which ones do you want to execute against? And yeah, we've started working with an agentic AI tool, and it has been interesting learning it, because when we looked at the use case, we were very conscious of, are we having this agent try and represent themselves as a human and then be called at it and give a bad taste to someone, and they say, oh, why is this person trying to be human but not being a human? I mean, I'm sure we all have experiences of getting spam phone calls all day long, right? Whether it's duct cleaning or whether it's something else, it's, we all have a reaction to kind of these kind of calls. And our approach has been to, yes, if we are doing a webinar, if we are having an event, if we are hosting something, if we want to drive someone to look at a piece of content or engage with something else, let's try and just make them aware that that's there. And I think, to your point and some of the numbers you just mentioned there, Dan, the productivity gains that we've seen from that, literally we made, I think it was 110 phone calls, 110 reach outs to within 3 minutes. So, and all of those calls are recorded, they're transcribed. I can, integrate them with Salesforce. I can integrate them with other CRM systems. I can do some analysis on them. And we actually weren't looking for the handoff. And what I found, my experience, just in the tools that I use, I'm sure that there's better ones, and maybe I'm sure they're only going to get better, is when you instigate an agent to do a handoff, that is their one mission in life, and it becomes overwhelming for them. So the interaction that you have now with this agent becomes all encompassing of, can I transfer you now? Can I transfer you now? And it's not a great experience, versus the experience that we've tried to give is educate them so that they don't wander off into the forest somewhere. They still can give you very detailed information about, what does your company do? What does that do? What does that do? And they're educated, and it's actually pretty good in terms of educating the recipient on what we do and what we want them to do. But the core message was achieved really within the first kind of 12 seconds. It was, hey, I'm calling from this person, want to tell you about something, and using their name very quickly early on, telling them, hey, yeah, I'm an agent, and if they, depending on how creative you want them to be, hey, are you an AI agent? You can have some fun with it, right? And they can respond with something, engaging. So yeah, our use case is really to drive kind of the recipient to either a website, a webinar, go look at something else, drive registration somewhere else, but really give us that volume of calls that we can get out with different voices, different accents, different narratives. And also, if we want, as we go to different markets, like we've been trying to do things in different countries, we can explore that without putting feet on the street, and actually just see what kind of response we get, measure the traffic. So there's so much to those things. But yeah, we're having some fun.
One of my expert tips on webinars, I used to do them a lot, but they're a lot of work to set up a good webinar. So, but my expert tip is, we used to have a higher conversion getting meetings pre-webinar, talking to people, confirming if they're going to show for the webinar. Because a lot of people said, oh, I can't make it, because they're already giving you intent saying they're interested. And so, how about I just set up a personal one-on-one with one of our guys, and we would convert probably 6x before. And we would also get the people who did not show, the people who actually attended, converted lower, believe it or not. Right?
Interesting. That is interesting. Yeah. Yeah. I think, and also that, like, now it's the type of content you can create as well, right? I think that they're, whether it's creating a video, I mean, it used to be, some great tools out there that would superimpose your face or, superimpose someone else's name, but now you can get a full digital twin. You can create an entire movie. You can make things a lot more personalized. The one thing that I've noticed with some peers and some other people I know, they're like, oh, well, everyone could do that. But I think personalization is going to be a big thing that's going to make a difference today versus the future. And it's interesting how some people almost turning themselves off to it. It's like, oh yeah, I'm not going to use that. Everyone could do that. Everyone could do that, but not everyone is doing that. And I think that's going to be the difference maker for some people.
Yeah, I believe that will unfold in a bit of a different way, because I think of LLMs I think the ability for people to hyper personalize what they need from a vendor is way faster and better than even talking to a junior salesperson now. So I would argue that that intercept point where a buyer is going to talk to a company is even going to be more compressed. So, now it's like 85 to 90% before they come and talk to you. I would argue it's going to be at the 95th percentile point where they come and talk to you, because they're going to be modeling, saying, hey, based on these customers, are they a fit for us? Based on these features, how do they rate? Like the ability to do an LLM sort of search for that. I would still argue, I don't know if anyone read the blog I put out, but LLMs are not necessarily your best friend in pulling large lists if you're an enterprise. So be very wary, run a bunch of prompts to see how you show an LLM search, especially for list building related to your industries. And we've done a lot proactively at ServicePath to make sure, because as you know, we're covered by all the big analysts, but some of the LLMs disagree with us, even though it's on Gartner's page and Forrester's page. It's very, very interesting. So we've been doing a lot of things proactively to mitigate that, and it's had significant impacts. But early on, and unless don't fly blindly. Test all the LLMs that people could pull searches up for your product type, and make sure they exist.
And I think actually asking those agents, why didn't you come up with this company, or why didn't you come up with that company? It is interesting. Like they're not all the same answer. So it's not, you solve for this, then you're suddenly going to appear in chat and Grok and, Claude and Perplexity and whatever. It's very different answers.
So Rob, I know we're getting close to the time, but it's always, who was the person who had the most impact on you, and someone starting in sales, or someone, what gets you up in the morning and so excited about continuing this career and driving a company forward?
I think for me, I love change. I love the innovation. I love being able to try new things. I think that's why I thrived at Microsoft under the incubation things. I think that's why I really enjoyed my time at AWS. It was new, especially in Canada. We were trying lots of things. I think being able to try new things, reap the rewards of them when they work, but not be disappointed when they don't as well. And I think definitely with all of the capabilities that we've got now, there's so many things you could choose from. Things are going to fail. Okay, great. That's okay. That failed. Let's move on and not be kind of held to that. So for me, it's trying new things every day. It's hearing new crazy things that customers want to do and being able to solve that. I still get a buzz from being able to solve problems. So, and those problems could be internal things that we're trying to solve to get a better reach, or they could be customers' problems that they're trying to solve. It's great. We had a conversation last week with a company in Montreal, and just over Zoom, but the conversation was, oh my God, you can do that, we can do that. It's like, yeah, absolutely. And it's great to think that you're adding value to someone's day job, or making something easier or better. So yeah.
And who was the big mentor? Who was the one guy or gal?
I don't know that I'm going to name them.
What organization?
It was Microsoft. So 23 years ago, when I got hired into Microsoft in the UK, the guy that hired me, the guy that led me through the incubation team, he was hard. He was a tough guy. He was actually ex-military, special services in the military, very tough nut. And he would give me feedback that was really direct, very kind of clear cut. And I think I honestly learned more from him than I did, early on, and then continuing on when we met. And I think, an attaboy from him meant a lot to me, because he wasn't easy to please, and he was always very kind of hard on, not hard, but firm and direct and a straight talker. And I appreciate that. I really, get down to the real kind of, don't sugarcoat it, give me the goods. And he did that, but he also had an excellent read on people, on how to get things done, and actually I would say kind of political awareness, not at the country level, but inside companies, being able to navigate kind of who makes things happen and how things happen. I learned a tremendous amount from him. So yeah.
Oh, awesome. And finally, what's your most exciting sales motion you're working on? What opportunity set that you guys are doing at IT Methods that you think is the most compelling, that is going to be game changing?
Yeah, great question. We're actually going to the UK next week. We're going to do, we've got a bunch of meetings lined up with some people. And one of the key topics is being able to set up AI coding environments for enterprises in a secure, air-gapped manner, with compliance, with controls, and giving them the easy button to be able to kind of build their models, use their data, help developers develop AI-driven code, but not worry if a security risk is being introduced to that. Putting the wrapper around that to give them the confidence that they've got a kind of a really well secured environment, and that AI is helping them develop code and could do that at an agentic level, on a much different level of productivity than they've ever got. And I think that's great, because I think any way you can get a 10x in what you're doing, that's really going to be a difference maker for people. So that's a key area for us right now.
Well, awesome. Well, Rob, thank you very much. It's, as always, a pleasure. I always learn something new, which is amazing.
Likewise.
Anyways, and happy Friday.
Happy Friday.
Cheers.